Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you very much.
Good. How's all your PhD work going?
Yeah, very well. Thank you very much. Got lots to do, so yeah.
I bet. All right, thanks for joining us, Joanna, and thanks to everybody watching. Today we have Joanna Harris. She has been working with the Manta Trust for a few years now, and she did her master's research on reef mantas in the Maldives, and now she's doing her PhD research on mantas in Chagos. So I think she's going to tell us a bit more about her master's research today. As for the technical information, this webinar will last between 40 minutes to an hour. We're going to have a presentation from Joanna and then we'll take questions. So as audience members, your audio and video is automatically switched off, but we'd love to hear from you at any time. So please put questions or comments into the Q&A box, which is on the Zoom toolbar at any point during the webinar, and we will collate them and ask Joanna as many as we can at the end. Okay, over to you, Joanna.
Awesome, thank you very much. So hi everyone. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen. So I'm going to be talking to you today about my paper, which has gone with the wind. So this is a publication that is out shortly, but we're going to give you a bit of a background and insight into the publication. So it's about the seasonal distribution and habitat use by reef manta rays in the Maldives and the implications for conservation. So first, we're going to have a brief background on reef manta rays, some of their conservation concerns for the species, and then we're going to focus on the Maldives subpopulation specifically, and then we'll have a look at the study. So the study aims some of the methods, results, and implications for conservation. So, oh, my screen isn't changing, bear with me, sorry. So reef manta rays are zooplanktivorous elasmobranch. They're slow growing and late to mature. They also have low fecundity, so this means that they don't have many offspring in their lifetime. They don't reproduce very often. So their geographical range then, so they're found in the tropical and subtropical waters of the Indo-West Pacific Ocean. So you can see that range on the screen there. But unfortunately for manta rays, these relatively warm waters are largely oligotrophic. So that means that they're low in nutrients, so zooplankton is fairly limited. So this means that reef manta rays rely on areas where productivity is enhanced, so productivity hotspots. And predominantly for the species, this is atoll ecosystems, where local oceanographic processes increase nutrient supply, so you have higher levels of productivity in zooplankton. So coral reef ecosystems are really highly fragmented throughout the species range, so the population is also highly fragmented. So we call these sometimes referred to as subpopulations. So each subpopulation will concentrate an awful lot of their activities in specific hotspot locations. So they'll come together and aggregate in specific locations, often in large numbers, and this can be to feed or to visit cleaning stations. So they also show high site fidelity, so individuals will tend to return to a particular location over and over again. So why is conservation of the reef manta ray important? Well, the species are listed as vulnerable to extinction on the IUCN Red List of threatened species. And this is because of catastrophic declines that have been linked to extreme exploitation, particularly by target fisheries for their gill rakers for use in Asian medicine. They also form a proportion of bycatch, and they're extremely valuable to the tourist industry, which means that there's been mounting touristic pressure and issues with things such as increased number of boat strikes. So as we said just before, or as I said just before, the species have conservative life history. They don't reproduce very quickly. So human pressures such as these can have a massive impact on the species' survival. So the Maldives subpopulation is the world's largest known subpopulation of reef manta ray, and it's really good news in the region because they are protected from target fisheries. There are other conservation concerns, however. So for example, there's tourism, particularly poorly managed and unregulated activities. There's also extensive development and the expansion of islands. You get pollution and habitat degradation. And something else that we need to worry about as well is the impacts of climate change. So one example would be rising sea surface temperatures. So this has the potential to disrupt zooplankton dynamics, and as that's what the manta rays feed on, it could also affect them as well. So effective conservation, so effective protection of the Maldives subpopulation is definitely needed. But for conservation to be, any kind of conservation measures to be implemented, regulated and enforced effectively, you really need to know, first of all, where the mantas are so that you know where to protect them. You need to know when they're there. And then you also, if you can find out the why, so what's influencing their spatial and temporal distribution, you really have a good chance at planning ahead for their future conservation. So first of all, the where and the when. So the Reef Montereys of the Maldives engage in a biannual migration within the archipelago. So in the southwest monsoon, which is around April to November, they're predominantly found on the east side of the atolls, and then in the northeast monsoon, December to March, they're predominantly on the west side of the atolls. So why does this occur? Well, to look into this further, we need to look at the monsoons, but before we can do that, we need to look at ocean surface currents. So a brief background on ocean surface currents. So these are the ocean surface currents that are driven by winds, and in the northern hemisphere they go clockwise, and in the southern hemisphere they go anti-clockwise. So this is to do with the Earth's rotation and something known as the Coriolis effect. So the northern Indian Ocean, where the Maldives is situated, is an exception, and that's because of its intense atmospheric monsoon systems that reverse the direction of the winds twice a year, and with it the ocean surface current. So this is known as the South Asian monsoon, and it has two components, the northeast and the southwest monsoon. So I'm going to show you those monsoons and the effect that they have on the Maldives and why it's thought that it influences the seasonal migration of the manta rays. So here's a map of the Maldives. So it's 26 coral atolls and many low-lying coral reef islands in the northern Indian Ocean. And this is the Maldives in the southwest monsoon. So you can see the winds, which are represented by the arrows there. Those are driving the ocean surface currents across to the east. In the northeast monsoon, the direction of the winds is almost completely in the opposite direction, and they're driving the ocean surface currents across to the west. So these ocean surface currents induce upwelling on the downstream side, which brings nutrient-rich waters from depths, which can enhance productivity. So this enhanced productivity can be seen using satellite imagery, which detects chlorophyll A. So high levels of chlorophyll A indicate high levels of productivity. So if you have a look at the examples from both of the monsoons, so this is taken from MODIS aqua satellite. So in the southwest monsoon, you can see you've got the winds driving those ocean surface currents to the east. You've got the enhanced productivity on the east. And then in the northeast monsoon, you can see that the enhanced productivity is on the west. So this leads to a higher abundance of zooplankton. So in the southwest monsoon, you'll find manta rays on the east, and in the northeast monsoons, you'll find them on the west. So to be able to use this knowledge, to be able to further our conservation efforts, we really need to do a little bit more digging and find out a lot more about this biannual migration pattern. And that was kind of what the idea with the Gone with the Wind paper. So what we were doing was trying to sort of assess conservation requirements for the region. So to be able to do that, we needed to address four main areas. So first of all, it's to identify specific locations used by manta rays throughout the Maldives archipelago. So number two is to identify the primary functions of these sites. So are they feeding areas or cleaning stations, or are they used for something different? So this is particularly important because site function can really affect the kind of conservation measures that are required in a location. So for example, at feeding locations, you've got manta rays are swimming along with their mouths open. They'd often be on the surface feeding. So the main vulnerability there would be fishing gear entanglement or being hit by a boat. Then at cleaning stations, it might be habitat degradation that is the most predominant threat, sort of degrading coral reefs. And then at both locations, it's any kind of human disturbance. So for example, tourists in the water, that kind of disturbance can drive them away from these important aggregation areas. So number three was to determine the patterns in the Reef Monterey presence at the sites that are identified. And then number four is to investigate the environmental influences of that biannual migration pattern. So to do this, I used photo ID records from 2005 to 2017, and then I used modelling techniques. So for that, I needed environmental data from the same period, and then I used multiple linear regression. So we're going to have a look at those data sets and techniques in a little bit more detail now. So this research study utilised the Manta Trust Maldives Monterey project database. So it's 13 years worth of their data. So it was at the time that we, so that within that 13 years, there'd been over 50,000 sightings of more than 4,000 individually identified reef manta rays. So they're individually identified using the ventral spot pattern. So if you have a look at the pictures along the bottom, you can see these are ID shots that have been taken by researchers. And right in the corner, you can see the area that's used for identification. So the spot pattern here is unique to every individual, which means it can be tracked throughout its lifetime. So this data set really is unprecedented. So the temporal scale of this data set and the sheer number of sightings and individuals that are included means that it offers the most detailed, the best way possible to date to have a look at the distribution and habitat use of reef manta rays in the most detailed way possible to date. So onto the environmental variables that I included. So we discussed that the biannual migration is thought to be influenced by the monsoons, in particular the winds and the enhanced productivity that comes with that. So these are the variables that I wanted to include in the model. So the Maldives Meteorological Service provided the wind data, and I calculated the percentage of days each month that the wind direction was either in a northeast or a southwest monsoon wind direction. So if you have a look at the compass, you can see the areas highlighted. So when in the southwest and the northeast monsoon, so that's characteristically the direction that the winds would be coming from in those seasons. So then I calculated the mean monthly wind speed of both of these directions, so the northeast and the southwest monsoon. And then I also calculated mean monthly wind speed of other. So it's everything that you can see in the white would be other directions. And then I used MODIS aqua satellites, so monthly chlorophyll composites, to extract mean chlorophyll concentration from the east and the west side of the atolls. So the modelling approach that I used was multiple linear regression, which is a statistical method for estimating the relationship between a response variable and two or more explanatory variables. So I'll show you that in a little bit more detail now. So first of all, we needed to know whether they were on the east side or the west side. So each one of the atolls had to be geographically divided into east and west. And then the response variable is the percentage of days each month the manta rays were present on either the east side or the west side of the atolls. So east and the west side of the atolls were modelled separately. And then the explanatory variables is a total of 6. So we've got 2 wind directions, 3 wind speeds, and then the chlorophyll concentration on the west side of the atolls for the west models and the east side of the atolls for the east models. So I tested all combinations of 1 to 6 explanatory variables. And what I wanted to find out is which one of these variables or combinations of these variables had the most influence on the percentage of manta rays on either the east side or the west side of the atoll. So, for example, if we have a look at the monthly percentage of mantas on the west side, we could have a single variable. It might be the southwest monsoon wind speed that's the most influential, or it could be a combination of 2 different variables or 3 different variables. So the southwest monsoon wind direction and chlorophyll concentration on the west as well. So let's start having a look at some of the results. So the first thing we had to do was identify the specific locations used by reef manta rays. So there's actually 273 sites where manta rays were sighted, so identified throughout the Maldives. We had to identify the primary function of these sites. There were 67 cleaning stations, 104 feeding areas, and then 102 areas where mantas were kind of just seen cruising around. Next, we wanted to determine the patterns of reef manta ray presence at these sites. So if you have a look at the maps, so we identified 48 hotspot locations. So these are locations where there have been more than 100 sightings at each. So here we have the northeast monsoon and all of the 48, the locations out of those 48 that you used in the northeast monsoon, and then in the southwest monsoon, all the locations that are used. So we've got cleaning stations in the blue and feeding areas in the red. And then the numbers in these circles actually relate to the name of the location, which can be found in the paper. So altogether, there were 25 cleaning stations and 23 feeding areas. Just at these 48 sites, 4,014 individuals were identified and 3,124 were actually sighted on more than one occasion. 70% of those that were seen more than once were predominantly at a single location. So that means that the individual was always at one location, repeatedly sighted at one location, or it was a few different locations, but it was predominantly at one, which really speaks to the high site fidelity that we talked about in the sort of introduction. And the busiest area by far was Honolulu Bay, so with 20,892 sightings of 1,663 individuals. So next was the environmental influences of that biannual migration pattern we've been talking about. So first of all, the monthly percentage of manta rays on the east side of the atolls, and if you remember, they're on the east during the southwest monsoon. The most influential variables were the southwest monsoon wind speed and the chlorophyll concentration on the east side of the atolls. So this model result really makes sense. So they're found on the east side during the southwest monsoon. So you've got those southwest monsoon winds that are driving those ocean surface currents, enhancing productivity. So it really makes sense that it would be the southwest monsoon winds and the chlorophyll that's driving the most influential for the percentage of manta rays on the east. Then I looked at the manta rays on the west side of the atolls. So they're found on the west side of the atolls during the northeast monsoon, and the most influential variables were southwest monsoon wind speed and chlorophyll on the west side of the atolls. So this result was a lot more surprising because we know that it's the northeast monsoon winds that are driving those ocean surface currents across the atolls, inducing upwelling. But it seems that it's actually the southwest monsoon winds that seem to have more influence and seem to be more influential. So we're going to have a look at why that might be in the implications for conservation. So the models highlight that the southwest monsoon plays a key role in driving productivity in both seasons, and this is what supports the Reef Monterey subpopulation. The southwest monsoon wind, the reason why this might be is the southwest monsoon is actually the dominant of the two components of the South Asian monsoon. So if you remember, I told you that the intense atmospheric monsoon system that reverses the direction of the current twice a year is the South Asian monsoon, but it has two components. And the northeast monsoon really is dominated by the onset and retreat of the southwest monsoon. So the southwest monsoon is a really important component in sort of dominating the whole process. So a worrying factor in this identifying that the southwest monsoon winds are so important is that human-induced climate change has been suggested to really be influencing the South Asian monsoon. So of particular concern to us would be that there's suggested to be shifts in the timing of the onset and retreat of the southwest monsoon, and also a weakening in the southwest monsoon winds. So potentially, just sort of speculating the things that could occur with changes such as those, stratification of the waters, which could inhibit the nutrients, so it could reduce zooplankton, potentially changing the dynamics of the zooplankton, and reducing food availability, which would be a real problem for the reef manta rays. So what can be done? So the marine protected areas with management plans and active enforcement can help reduce the impact of human pressures. So currently only 42 small marine protected areas which cover less than 1% of the reef area in the Maldives. So that's only a tiny proportion of the area that is actually protected. Only one of these, so that's Honolulu Bay MPA, which you can see here at Bar Atoll, it has a management plan and active enforcement. So all these yellow boxes are marine protected areas that are in place but have no kind of management plan, so they're just sort of on paper. But a marine protected area can't prevent changes in the southwest monsoon dynamics. Now, although that statement in itself is actually true, marine protected areas can increase resilience to the impacts of climate change. So we're going to break that down a little bit. So if you've got the impacts of climate change, so we were looking at changes in the southwest monsoon wind dynamics, or it could be something like rises in sea surface temperatures. Reef Monterey do have the potential to be able to adapt to those changes. So they could adapt physically by becoming acclimatized to warmer waters, or they could adapt their behavior, start feeding in different locations at different times, or perhaps for longer. The problem is, if you add to the impacts of climate change human disturbance, that doesn't just double the problem for the manta rays. It can have what's called a synergic effect. So this is where the combined effect of the two is much greater than the sum of their effects. So a really simple sort of explanation would be that the impacts of climate change plus the impacts of human disturbance doesn't just double the impact. It could, for example, increase the impact 5-fold. So that's just an example. But that means that by removing human disturbance, you're giving them a much better chance at being able to adapt to anything that climate change has to throw at them. So a well-managed marine protected area can help increase manta ray resilience to climate change. So for future action, it seems marine protected areas are essential. And as I said, currently there are only few and relatively small marine protected areas in the Maldives. So now we have on the screen a map which shows all of the areas that are utilised. So these are the 48. So they've now been divided into feeding areas in the squares and cleaning stations in the circles, and then the colour relates to the seasonality of the site. So you can see that the marine protected areas are really tiny. So we've got, for example, Honolulu Bay, which is a fantastic marine protected area, and it's really, really important that it's there, but it only encompasses 2 feeding areas. So if you have a look, just outside, we have another 9 key habitats, and there's actually been around 8,000 sightings at these locations. That's a huge number of mantas that are utilising these areas, but they aren't protected in any way from the boat strikes or any other of the issues that we raised before. So something like Honolulu Bay, if we had an expansion of such existing marine protected areas, would help reduce the human impact at all these locations where there's a huge number of manta rays that use them. So as well, there are a lot, as we've said, of small MPAs. Now, lots of those are predominantly there to protect patches of reef. So they are small, and very few of them encompass any of the areas where manta rays are using that are key habitats. But because they're sort of highly fragmented, as you can see on North Male here, quite highly fragmented, merging such small MPAs together, which actually has been suggested to be more cost effective, would actually cover not only areas which are utilised by reef manta rays and help protect them, it would also help protect their environment as well. So marine protected areas do need comprehensive management plans, and they need to address specific threats. So for example, as we've said a few times, the feeding areas, they might be vulnerable to boat strikes and fishing gear entanglement. So where you have a big group of feeding areas where lots of mantas are feeding, the most beneficial kind of marine protected area would be a no-take marine protected area, for example. So the marine protected area should also include a code of conduct, and there is a code of conduct in the Maldives that was published in 2017. So that's the site address that you can get it from there. So this is a 10-step guide to sustainable tourism, which is described in detail by our wonderful Dr. Annie Murray, so references at the bottom there. And it's designed to try and limit the amount of impact that humans are having on reef manta rays. The problem is, at the moment, compliance is voluntary, and the compliance as Annie shows in her paper, the compliance rate is low. It's also been shown in other studies that the longer that the code of conducts aren't enforced, the more that the compliance rate will diminish. So it's really important that enforcement of these kind of codes of conduct, or this, especially specifically this 10-step guide, is enforced. It is essential. So by being able to merge smaller MPAs or expanding existing MPAs, ensuring that we've got comprehensive and appropriate management plans in place, not only are we going to be able to protect the reef manta rays, but also their precious habitats and the marine environment of the Maldives. So thank you all for listening. This has been a presentation on the Gone with the Wind paper. So it has only been sort of a brief insight into everything that's in the paper. There's loads more packed in there, and that should be available in the next few days. But if anybody would like to ask any questions, I'm available.
Hi, thank you so much, Joanna. That was fascinating to hear about the impacts that climate change might have on the manta distribution and feeding and everything. Are there any plans underway for new MPAs, do you know, or for strengthening the MPAs?
So there is a lot of work going on, and actually the maps that we came up with for the paper were submitted to the Maldives Government quite a while ago with the abstract for the paper, and they are really keen. They are creating initiatives to try and expand their marine protected areas. So they are, it's a slow process, but they are working, with people who can give them advice on, where these marine protected areas should be. Unfortunately, now everything's sort of ground to a halt with the situation that we're in at the moment. But hopefully that will begin to develop further in the future.
Yeah, let's hope so. Okay, so I've spent quite a lot of time with you in the Maldives in the past, in the water, and you've been in the field in Chagos as well. I just wondered if you have any of your best experiences that you've had with mantas, if you can tell us about any of those.
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple that really stand out, and I was actually working for the Maldives for the Manta Trust, or volunteering and doing sort of data analysis for about a year before I'd ever even seen a manta in the wild. So that was insane. When I actually came over and visited you. I don't know if you noticed the photo of you in the presentation.
Oh, the one from the front of the boat. I saw it.
And so, yeah, that was just amazing. That's one of the few times really that I've really got to be in the water with the manta rays and just relax. You're not there for, I wasn't data collecting at the time, and it's just amazing feeling to be able to do that. And then in Chagos, because it's so remote, it really is, we go and we live on a boat when we go there. You don't go to dry land, and you only have a very limited amount of time. It's very go, go, go all the time. So we have to, get sort of IDs or deploy sort of equipment, anything that we need to do. It's very, very rare that you will get any time to just kind of relax and soak up your surroundings. But this picture that's on the screen was taken just before I was on our very last day there, and we'd finished all the work that we needed to do. And this manta ray came back and had a look at me, and I love it when they turn over to have a look. It's so lovely. So yeah, that was one of my that picture was taken by Annie, actually.
That's an amazing picture.
Yeah, it's cool.
These are my favorite encounters as well, and I think quite a few people on the webinars have had similar encounters, and it's always really special when the mantas are kind of interacting with you as well and curious about what you're doing. Yeah. Did you get any really good days in Haniforu when you were with us? I can't remember.
No, we did sort of mantas barrel rolling into you, and you're desperately trying to follow codes of conduct, and they're like swimming underneath you and pushing you out of the water. And it was crazy. It was really good. And that was more or less my first experience, so that was amazing. So.
Okay, awesome. Right, we will move on to some questions from the audience. We've had some really good ones. All right, what should we do first? Okay, we have one from Miriam. Thanks for asking a question, Miriam. She said she's wondering if you already saw any of the trends that you mentioned regarding climate change in the data set that you were working on, and if there's any evidence that the migration will be influenced by the changing climate, or if it's only a concern at the moment.
So one of the really interesting things that we came across in the paper, I didn't discuss it in the presentation, but we did prediction modelling. So we also used the most influential variables to see if we could predict the distribution of the manta rays. And we found that usually, yes, you could, except for in the transition months. So the transitions between the monsoons are like March, April, and then November, December at the other end when it switches monsoons. And the models really had a hard time predicting that. And that's because when you would expect them, because of certain, weather characteristics or chlorophyll characteristics, you'd expect them to be in one place. They weren't, they were somewhere else. And we really don't know why that is. And you know, how much it's changing. So one year you would have got 100% in April being on one side and not on the other, and then you slowly see it shift. So we don't have any evidence that that has anything to do with the southwest monsoon, but that would certainly be a logical link, that there's shifts in the onset and retreat of it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Hannah has asked, she said, thank you for the talk and congrats on the publication. And she's asking how you got involved with Manta Trust.
I was actually at Cornwall College. I was just finishing my first year, I think, and I got the opportunity to volunteer helping do identifications. So I think you had a really, really busy season, so you needed sort of all hands on deck, so people remotely doing some IDs for you. So that's how I first got involved. And then I learned, obviously having done the IDs, knowing that this database existed. I was desperate to get my hands on it for do some analysis. So I just asked. So when I was doing my honours project, and Guy was amazing. So actually Annie was the first person I went to meet to discuss that with, and we sort of came up with ideas of how the database could be utilised, and then it went from there.
Great. Well, I'm glad that you made your way in and now you're doing so much with Manta Trust. It's amazing. Actually, on that topic, we have another one who said she is busy completing her honours degree and she would like to know if you have any advice on how to not be completely overwhelmed by data analysis.
Oh, it is a hard one. I think I get almost addicted to data analysis, and I think it's a really good idea that when you do start feeling overwhelmed, to try writing your results out. So it doesn't matter how far you've gotten with your analysis, start writing your results. Does it make sense? Once you see it written down, sometimes you'll think, oh yeah, that doesn't make sense, or you know, and to try and do it in stages, and not try and overwhelm yourself. Just do it in little sort of stages each time.
Okay, great. I hope that's helpful for Hannah. Okay, Katerina has asked, how are the local population involved with the conservation in these areas?
So what, in the Maldives?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, so they're highly involved with. There's a lot of locals that do the you have the internships and stuff. So yeah, I mean they are involved in the conservation. The mantas are extremely valuable to the Maldives. They manta tourism, and they are very interested in protecting it. So yeah, there is a lot of local contribution as well. And obviously you do all your outreach and education, wonderful education program out there. So yeah, they're really involved. I mean, that's something more you could expand on actually with the stuff that you do at the schools and stuff.
Yeah, we do a sort of marine biology program that we run with a different school every 6 months, and it started off with just one school and now it's expanded to I think 4 atolls where we're based, and so we're going into different schools every 6 months within these atolls and taking the kids snorkeling, teaching them about marine conservation, marine biology, not just mantas, but everything. And the best part is taking them in the water, because some of these kids haven't been snorkeling before and they have the most amazing marine ecosystems like 2 seconds from their house. So that's the most important part. And then you get these kids that are coming through that now really want to become marine biologists and enter the field, which is sometimes dominated by foreigners. So it's good to get much more local people involved.
Have you seen the goose pimples then? That's so sweet.
I miss it. I miss all the kids and I miss the program, but hopefully be back soon. All right, we've got loads to get through. One from Emmanuel. Emmanuel has asked if you have any idea about the connectivity between the Maldives manta ray populations and those in other sites in the Indian Ocean.
We really don't, and that's actually something that has been people have been trying to investigate, scientists have been trying to investigate for quite a while. So there doesn't seem to be any evidence of connectivity between these subpopulations, but that doesn't really make sense because they are manta rays are able to migrate very long distances, and also they had to have got there in the first place. So there must have been some point that a single manta ray probably went off, or a few manta rays went off and started another subpopulation. So that began. So we're working on that at the moment. So that's something that we're really looking into, because at the moment there doesn't seem to be any evidence of connectivity between subpopulations.
Okay. It's nice to think of this small group of very adventurous manta rays just heading off for a new shoreline somewhere across the ocean.
I know. And there's a paper published recently where they saw one, I think it's in the Western Pacific, sorry, I might be completely wrong there, but it was a single female manta ray that was pregnant, and she shouldn't have been there. So it gives sort of maybe evidence of a sort of a partial migration strategy where you would get a pregnant manta that would go and find somewhere else and give birth there. So you don't know whether that's evidence of it or not. It's just based on the sighting.
Is that an oceanic?
No, it's a reef manta.
Reef manta. Oh, that's cool. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, what's next? We have one from Inju, and they've asked, is freediving a must for manta ray research?
I mean, unless you wanted to use scuba, and scuba is restricted in a lot of places. I don't use it in the areas that I research, and I know you don't as well, because of the disturbance that it can cause, the difficulties that it can cause. So you can definitely snorkel with them, though. I mean, if you are going to be actually researching them, you do need to be able to get underneath them. So you would need to be able to sort of, dive down to sort of 5 or 10 meters to be able to, but also because if you aren't that great in the water, you've got more chance of disturbing the mantas as well. So, people sort of boating to the surface or, not being able to do what they need to do can sort of frighten the mantas away. So I wouldn't say it's an absolute must to interact with them, but as far as research is concerned, it's definitely a really good idea.
Yeah, but having said that, I think you can learn very fast, and I've been amazed at some of the interns we have, and I couldn't freedive when I started with Manta Trust, and you learn so quickly because you're out in the field all the time. So
Exactly.
yeah, as long as you have the confidence to try, I think, then you
I'm not amazing. So I've always, whenever I always take another member of the Manta Trust with me, and then sort of between us, we can get stuff done. So, I'm not amazing, and you're right, you just need practice. The more you're in the water, it can happen for you so quickly once you're in the water more often.
And then some sites you do mainly dive, like in Lamu, they have the cleaning station and it's quite deep, but you wouldn't see feeding mantas. So it's a lot of diving. But I guess a mixture of the two is the best to have if you can.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. What should we ask next? We have one from Valerie. Hi, Valerie. Valerie said, hi, Joanna. Thanks for the really interesting talk. For the reef mantas in the Maldives, would it be more beneficial to create many small MPAs or a few large MPAs?
The larger ones for definite. I mean, they are very highly mobile. They move around a lot, and you need kind of a network for them to move around. So if you have these really small MPAs, you've really got them kind of making a dash where there could be, heavy boat traffic or fishing. So yeah, definitely larger marine protected areas are better for reef manta rays. They're protected more fully.
Everywhere. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks. And we have one more from Miriam. She's asking if you have any recommendations for modeling courses.
And there are actually quite a few online that you can do. I mean, a Google search can get you some good ones. And I would check on places like, and I know this might sound a bit crazy, but places like Groupon and stuff like that actually offer, you can find some really good deals on modeling techniques. I do a little bit of reading up on different modeling techniques that can be used for different kinds of data sets. Some are a lot more easy to use. Some require a lot of assumptions to be met, so it can be really, really time consuming and then might not even work. So yeah, it's sort of identifying the modeling technique that you think is best for you. And then looking at online courses, you get some really good ones. Don't pay, a massive amount of money, because you can sometimes get them either for free or for very, very little through deals that are online and stuff.
Okay, cool. Good luck with that, Miriam. She's actually also said that she would like it if you would give a modeling webinar. I think you explained everything very clearly. It definitely made more sense to me, who struggles with stats. All right, cool. I think we'll move on to our last question now. So this is one we've been asking everyone. We've started a Manta Trust book club to help people find books about the ocean or the natural world that they might like to read during this strange quarantine time. Joanna, do you have a recommendation for us?
I do. So it's The Sea Around Us by Rachel Carson, and it is actually quite an old book, but it's really still relevant today. It's about the sort of history of the development of our knowledge of the ocean, and also how it, the sort of evolution of the ocean over time. The way it's packed with scientific facts, but the way that it's written is almost like a story. So it's almost like storytelling with sort of a real poetic narrative and good analogies all the way through. It's really awesome way to suck up all this information, but you just feel like you're reading kind of a novel or something.
Okay, I need to add this to my list. Every week I'm like going on Amazon Prime and ordering more and more things based on these recommendations. That sounds great. All right, I think we'll wrap up there. So thank you so much, Joanna. I hope you
Thank you, Flossie, and thank you everyone who listened today. Thank you very much.
Thanks for some great questions as well, as always, from those watching. And keep an eye out for Joanna's publication, which should be out soon. Is that right?
Yeah, sort of any day now, hopefully.
Okay, perfect. Right, I will just share my screen. Okay guys, thanks again for watching. We have a couple more webinars coming up. We have one at 9 a.m. on Friday, so a bit early, but it's going to be really cool. It's with Asia Haynes, and she's going to be talking about the Australian manta rays, including the world famous pink manta ray, so don't miss that one. And then we have another one next Monday at 10 a.m. and that's with Jamie, who runs the Thailand Manta Project, talking about mantas in the Andaman Sea. As always, you can find all our information on webinars on our website at mantatrust.org/webinars and our social media pages, where we'll be advertising all the latest webinars, so keep your eyes peeled. We would love for you to support us throughout this difficult time. One of the ways you can do this is through joining the Cyclone. It's a members-only hub where we share all of our latest research, research expeditions, videos with different members of our team, and things like this, and any funds raised go towards manta conservation and research. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you again, Joanna.
Very much. Bye bye.
Bye guys.